Crash landing on an alien world. Captain Luke Hawkins gripped the controls of his Terran Starhawk fighter as alarms blared and red warning lights flashed across the cockpit. He was caught in the gravitational pull of planet Neona, the dense jungles and vast oceans rapidly approaching as he spiraled down through the atmosphere. Despite his best efforts to stabilize the spacecraft, the damage from the asteroid field was too severe. Luke braced for impact as the Starhawk plowed into the lush canopy, hurtling through layers of iridescent foliage before crashing into the soft loam of the forest floor. Miraculously, the hardy spacecraft held together, and Luke found himself alive and relatively unscathed on this alien world. He quickly checked his supplies and survival gear before venturing out to explore his new surroundings. The air was thick with humidity and alive with the calls of exotic creatures. Massive trees stretched into the lavender sky, their trunks coiled with bioluminescent vines. As Luke searched for signs of civilization or a way to contact the Terran fleet, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Suddenly, a lithe figure dropped from the trees, landing in a crouch before him. Luke found himself face to face with a fierce female warrior, her opalescent skin adorned with intricate markings, a gleaming spear pointed at his chest. "I am Xanthi, queen of the Amazonian tribes of Neona," she declared in accented Terran standard. "You are trespassing on our lands, sky traveler. Surrender or face the consequences." Luke raised his hand slowly, showing he was unarmed. He knew when he was outmatched. "I am Captain Luke Hawkins of the Terran Galactic Fleet. I mean no harm. My ship crashed here by accident." Xanthi's emerald eyes narrowed. "Accident or not, you are now a prisoner of the Amazons. Come quietly, and you may yet survive." With a gesture from her spear, she indicated for Luke to march ahead of her into the dense jungle. As he complied, Luke couldn't help but marvel at the raw strength and grace of this alien warrior woman. He had a feeling his unexpected detour to planet Neona was about to turn into the most challenging and transformative experience of his life. Little did he know, the same thought was running through Xanthi's mind as she studied her intriguing human captive. The wheels of fate had been set in motion. Captured by the warrior queen, Luke soon found himself deep within the territory of the Amazonian tribes. Blindfolded by Xanthi, he was marched along hidden paths, the raucous sounds of the jungle giving way to the rushing waters and chanting voices. When she finally removed his blindfold, Luke was standing in the center of a grand amphitheater. Tiered seats carved from glowing crystal were filled with fierce Amazonian warriors, their opalescent skin adorned with the marks of their rank and tribe. On an ornate throne sat Xanthi, resplendent in shimmering robes and an elaborate headdress. She exuded an aura of power and authority that commanded the respect of all gathered. Luke found himself equally intimidated and captivated by her presence. "Sisters of the Amazonian tribes," Xanthi's voice rang out, "I present to you a trespasser from the stars." This human male, Captain Luke Hawkins, crashed his skyship onto our sovereign lands. In accordance with our ancient laws, I claim him as my personal captive. His fate shall be decided by the traditional trials of combat and cunning. Should he prove his worth, he may earn his freedom. Should he fail, she paused, her emerald eyes locking with Luke's, his life shall be forfeit. The crowd erupted in cheers and war cries, the pounding of drums and the clashing of spears filling the air. Luke stood tall, refusing to show fear in the face of this daunting pronouncement. He met Xanthi's gaze with a defiant stare of his own. As the assembly dispersed and Luke was led away to a holding cell, Xanthi found herself intrigued by the human spirit. There was a fire in his eyes, a determination that she rarely saw in the males of her own species. She chided herself for such thoughts. He was a captive, nothing more. And yet, a small part of her wondered what it would be like to know him as an equal. In his cell, Luke paced restlessly, his mind racing with plans of escape and strategies for the trials to come. But always, his thoughts returned to Xanthi. He had never encountered a female like her, so fierce and proud, a true warrior queen. A traitorous part of his heart whispered that perhaps capture by such a woman would not be so terrible a fate. And so, as the twin moons of Neona rose over the Amazonian stronghold, both captive and captor found their thoughts haunted by the other. It was the start of an unlikely and forbidden attraction, one that would be tested in the crucible of the coming trials, proving his worth. Over the next several days, Luke was put through a gauntlet of physical and mental challenges designed to test his strength, endurance, courage, and cunning. From armed combat against Amazonian champions to deciphering the cryptic riddles of the tribe's elders, he faced each trial with grit and determination. Throughout it all, Xanthi watched from her elevated throne, her emerald eyes tracking his every move. She told herself she was merely assessing his performance, guarding against any trickery. But deep down, she knew her fascination ran deeper. With each obstacle Luke overcame, her respect for him grew. In the arena, Luke faced off against Zora, a young but highly skilled Amazonian warrior eager to prove herself to her queen. Steel clashed against steel as they dueled beneath the scorching Neonian sun. Luke's years of training in the Terran fleet served him well, but Zora's agility and mastery of Amazonian fighting techniques made her a formidable opponent. As their blades locked, Zora hissed in Luke's face, "You may have bested the others, outsider, but you'll not defeat me. I fight for the glory of my queen." Luke met her gaze steadily, respect shining in his eyes. "And I fight for my freedom and a chance to prove that humans and Amazonians need not be enemies. Your loyalty does you credit, Zora. I see now why your queen values you so highly." Zora was taken aback by the compliment, her concentration wavering for a split second. It was all the opening Luke needed. With a deft twist of his blade, he disarmed her, sending her sword flying across the arena. The onlookers gasped as he held his blade to her throat, then erupted into cheers as he stepped back and extended his hand to help her up, a gesture of honor and reconciliation. From her throne, Xanthi found herself unexpectedly moved by Luke's actions. Here was a male who fought not just with strength, but with integrity and respect for his opponents. It was a rare quality among the males she had known, and it stirred something deep within her. As Luke continued to navigate the trials, Xanthi found herself increasingly drawn to him. In rare moments of respite, they would engage in conversation, discussing their respective cultures and philosophies. Xanthi was surprised to find in Luke an intellect to match her own, and a perspective that challenged her long-held beliefs about the nature of men and the world beyond her queendom. For his part, Luke found himself increasingly torn between his desire to return to his life among the stars and his growing attachment to Xanthi and the unique world she represented. He knew that even if he succeeded in the trials and won his freedom, a part of him would always remain on Neona, forever changed by his encounter with the remarkable warrior queen. And so, as the final trial approached, a test of courage and loyalty that would push Luke to his limits, both he and Xanthi knew that more than his freedom hung in the balance. The outcome would determine not just his fate, but the future of their relationship and the destiny of two worlds on the brink of a new era of understanding. An unexpected alliance. As Luke stood before Xanthi's throne, awaiting the pronouncement of his final trial, a commotion erupted at the edge of the arena. A scout raced in, her face etched with urgency. "My queen," she cried, dropping to one knee. "The Zorlacs have breached our eastern border. Their war machines approach the heart of our lands." Xanthi rose to her feet, her expression grim. The Zorlacs, a race of reptilian conquerors, had long coveted the lush resources of Neona. She had always known this day would come. She turned to Luke, a calculating look in her eye. "It seems the gods have presented you with a unique opportunity, Captain Hawkins. Fight beside us against the Zorlak invaders. Prove your worth not just as a warrior, but as a true ally to the Amazonian people. Do this, and win not just your freedom, but a place of honor among us." Luke met her gaze steadily, a fire kindling in his heart. "I will stand with you, Queen Xanthi, not for my own sake, but because it's the right thing to do." The Terran fleet has long opposed the Zorlak's expansionist aggression. Let us show them the strength of an Amazonian human alliance. And so, an unlikely partnership was forged in the heat of impending battle. Side by side, Luke and Xanthi planned their defense, combining the Amazonians' knowledge of the terrain with Luke's expertise in advanced Terran tactics and technology salvaged from his crashed ship. As the Zorlak army descended, a tide of scaled bodies and pulsing plasma cannons, the Amazonians met them with a fierce war cry. Xanthi led the charge, her spear flashing in the sun, Luke at her right hand with his Terran pulse rifle. Together, they carved a path through the enemy ranks, their combined strength and skill a beacon of hope for the embattled Amazonians. In the midst of the chaos, Luke found himself marveling at Xanthi's prowess and leadership. She was a force of nature, inspiring her warriors with her courage and determination. And when a Zorlak blade came too close, it was Luke's quick reflexes that deflected it, earning a nod of gratitude from the warrior queen. As the battle raged on, something shifted between them. The heat of combat forged a bond deeper than mere alliance or attraction. In the face of a common enemy, they found a unity of purpose, a recognition of the strength and valor in each other's hearts. And when the tide of battle finally turned, the Zorlaks retreating in disarray under the relentless onslaught of the Amazonian human forces, Luke and Xanthi stood victorious side by side. In that moment, blood-spattered and exhausted, but alive with triumph, they looked at each other with new eyes. Gone was the captor and captive, the queen and the outsider. In their place stood two warriors, two leaders, two kindred spirits who had found in each other an unexpected and unbreakable bond. The future, once so certain, now stretched before them filled with new possibilities, new challenges, and a new understanding of what it meant to fight not just for one's own survival, but for something greater. As the Amazonian warriors celebrated their victory, Luke and Xanthi slipped away to tend to each other's wounds and to ponder the implications of this turning point. They knew that everything had changed, that the old barriers between their worlds had crumbled. What remained to be seen was what they would build together in the aftermath, and whether the fragile connection forged in battle could withstand the tests of peace and the weight of their own growing feelings. The power of human love. In the days following the Zorlak defeat, a tentative peace settled over the Amazonian lands. Luke worked tirelessly alongside Xanthi and her warriors to fortify defenses and establish new protocols to guard against future invasions. His Terran knowledge and technology, once viewed with suspicion, were now welcomed as invaluable assets. But even as the practical matters of security and diplomacy occupied their days, Luke and Xanthi found themselves increasingly drawn to each other. Stolen glances, lingering touches, the brush of hands as they pored over maps and battle plans. Each interaction was charged with an undercurrent of longing and uncertainty. For Xanthi, the realization of her growing feelings for Luke was both exhilarating and terrifying. She had always prided herself on her independence, on the strength of her commitment to her queendom above all else. To find herself so powerfully drawn to a male, and an outsider at that, shook the very foundations of her identity. Luke, for his part, struggled with the knowledge that his time on Neona was limited. Even as his heart yearned for Xanthi, his duty to the Terran fleet called to him. He had always been a man of honor, dedicated to his mission. But now, faced with the prospect of leaving Xanthi behind, he found himself questioning everything he had once held certain. Matters came to a head when a hidden contingent of Zorlak assassins infiltrated the Amazonian stronghold, determined to strike at the heart of the alliance. In the ensuing melee, Luke found himself face to face with the Zorlak leader, a vicious warrior known for his cruelty and cunning. As they fought, the Zorlak taunted Luke. "You think you belong here, human. You think the Amazonian whore will choose you over her own kind. You're nothing but a plaything, a passing fancy. When she's done with you, she'll cast you aside." Enraged, Luke redoubled his efforts, his pulse rifle flashing. But the Zorlak was quick, his poisoned blade finding a gap in Luke's armor. As Luke fell, the Zorlak loomed over him, ready to strike the killing blow. In that moment, a fierce cry rang out. Xanth, having fought her way through the chaos, launched herself at the Zorlak. Her spear pierced his chest, even as his blade sliced across her ribs. They fell together, locked in a deadly embrace. Luke, struggling to his feet, raced to Xanthi's side. Cradling her in his arms, he watched in horror as blood pooled beneath her, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "Xanth," he whispered, his voice raw with anguish. "Don't leave me. I love you." At his words, Xanthi's eyes fluttered open, a weak smile on her lips. "Brave human," she murmured, her hand coming up to caress his cheek. "You have shown me the truth of love, the strength of it. In your arms, I understand that it is not weakness, but the greatest power of all." As he held her close, Luke felt a surge of determination. He would not let their story end here, not when they had just found each other. With a strength born of desperation and love, he lifted Xanthi, carrying her to the Amazonian healers. For days, he refused to leave her side as the healers worked their ancient arts. And when at last Xanthi opened her eyes, healed and whole, the joy in Luke's heart was brighter than 1,000 suns. In that moment, they both knew that something fundamental had shifted. The power of their love, tested in the crucible of battle and sacrifice, had forged an unbreakable bond. No longer were they just allies or lovers. They were two halves of a whole, their destinies intertwined. As Xanthi recovered, she and Luke knew they stood on the brink of a new chapter. The challenges ahead, of uniting their peoples, of building a life together, would be great. But in the strength of their love, they found the courage to face any obstacle. The warrior queen and her starfaring consort, ready to shape a new future together. A new beginning. As the twin suns of Niona rose over the Amazonian stronghold, Xanthi stood before her assembled warriors, Luke at her side. The great amphitheater was filled to capacity, a sea of opalescent faces turned towards their queen in anticipation. Xanthi's voice rang out clear and strong. "Sisters of the Amazonian tribes, we stand today at a turning point in our history. Not only have we defended our lands and our way of life from the Zorlak threat, but we have also learned a valuable Captain Luke Hawkins, once a stranger from the stars, has proven himself a true friend and ally to our people. In battle, he stood with us, his courage and skill an inspiration to all. And in the aftermath, his wisdom and compassion have helped guide us towards a new path. It is for these reasons, and for the love that has grown between us, that I have made a decision that may surprise some of you. I have asked Luke to stay, not as a captive or a subordinate, but as my partner and equal. Together, we will lead the Amazonian tribes into a new era of peace, prosperity, and openness to the wider galaxy." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a mix of astonishment and excitement. Never before had an outsider been elevated to such a position, much less a male. But as they looked upon Luke, standing tall and proud beside their queen, many began to nod in approval. They had seen his worth firsthand, and they trusted Xanthi's judgment. Luke stepped forward, his voice filled with emotion. "People of Niona, I am honored and humbled by your acceptance. When I first crashed upon your world, I never imagined I would find a home, much less a family. But in your strength, your wisdom, and your compassion, I have found all that and more. I pledge to you now, as I have pledged to your queen, that I will dedicate my life to serving and protecting this world and its people. Together, we will build bridges of understanding and cooperation, not just among the tribes of Niona, but with the many worlds beyond your stars. The Terran fleet will be not a threat, but an ally and friend." As he spoke, Xanthi reached out, her hand clasping his in a gesture of unity and love. The crowd erupted in cheers, the pounding of drums, and the clash of spears a joyous cacophony. In the days and years that followed, Luke and Xanthi worked tirelessly to fulfill their promise. Under their leadership, the Amazonian tribes flourished, their ancient traditions enriched by new ideas and technologies. Ambassadors were exchanged with the Terran fleet, fostering a new era of diplomatic and cultural exchange. And at the center of it all, the warrior queen and her starfaring consort, their love a beacon of hope and inspiration. Through trials and triumphs, sorrows and joys, they remained each other's strength and solace, a testament to the power of unity and diversity. For Luke, who had once longed for the vastness of space, Niona had become his heart's true home. And for Xanthe, who had once sworn to lead alone, Luke had become the partner she never knew she needed. Their story would be told for generations, a legend of love and courage that would inspire countless others to reach across the divides of culture and circumstance. For in the end, they had shown that the greatest strength of all lies not in the might of arms or the cold reaches of space, but in the warmth of two hearts beating as one. And so, under the glow of Niona's twin suns, the warrior queen and her starfaring king embarked on their greatest adventure yet, a lifetime of love, of leadership, and of shaping a future brighter than the stars themselves. The Amazons and the Terrans, once strangers and adversaries, now stood as one, united by a bond that would endure across the ages. It was a new beginning, a new chapter in the saga of two worlds, two peoples, two hearts, forever intertwined.